Hello, friends around the world. My name is Brandon Naber. Welcome to the Naberhood, where we have switched on, fun discussions with some of the most brilliant, successful, experienced, talented, and highly skilled sales and marketing minds on the planet from the world's fastest growing companies. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Today we have Ryan Bonnici on the show. Ryan is the Chief Marketing Officer of G2, formerly known as G2 Crowd. They have a $500 million valuation on $100 million capital raised, where he's driving growth of the world's leading B2B technology review platform that's helping more than 1.5 million business professionals make informed purchasing decisions every single month. With previous positions leading global marketing at HubSpot, who IPO'd back in 2014, they currently have a $7.5 billion valuation. Also Salesforce, who also IPO'd, they have a $124 billion valuation, and ExactTarget, who Salesforce purchased. Ryan's marketing and SaaS expertise has been featured in Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Business Insider, Entrepreneur.com, and Lifehacker. Here we go. Ryan, awesome to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Brandon. Thanks so much for having me.
You're in Chicago right now, correct?
I am, yeah. I moved from Australia to the US a few years ago, and it's beautiful, sunny, and warm outside, so I can't complain.
Awesome. I've done some solid research on your personal and professional from all the content you've put out there, and I'm pretty convinced, based on the moves that you made, that you're doing your penance for growing up in beautiful, best place in the world to live, Sydney and Cronulla, by trying to attempt to live in the coldest major market cities in the US, as Boston and Chicago. No.
Yeah, this is true.
No slag on those cities, because I love both of them. Lived in Chicago for about 5 years as well. Hey, let's jump in. So I know that you've had such an amazing career, and in the intro, everyone's heard a lot of your accomplishments, as well as a bunch of the companies you've gone through. So what we'll do, I think, today is we'll jump into some personal stuff first for maybe a few minutes and go through kind of what it was like growing up as Ryan Bonnici, and then we'll hop into some of the professional, and that'll be the meat of what we talk about. Sound okay?
Sounds amazing.
Cool. Let's Trinity Grammar School, growing up in Cronulla, going through all the interesting things you did in your childhood to become the person you are today, which I believe a perennial overachiever, which I'll talk about in a second. But talk a little bit about maybe 3 or 4 minutes on what it was like being Ryan Bonnici as a child and growing up.
Good question, gosh. I think in one word, what it was like growing up as Ryan Bonnici as a child would be lonely a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I was an only child, and my parents wanted to have more kids, but they separated when I was young, and then they got back together, and they eventually divorced, but they didn't really want to have a second or a third child because they weren't sure, about what was going to happen with their relationship. And so, I don't know, I remember just growing up and always wanting a brother or sister and someone to play with. And so, I don't know, I definitely feel like I was a very different person then than who I am now. But I don't know, I think that kind of shaped me, to be honest. I mean, in good ways and in bad ways. So I think I early on in kind of growing up sort of decided that I was going to put my self-worth on my accomplishments, which I wouldn't recommend people do necessarily, because you will always be unfulfilled because you're always trying to get the next best thing or to make yourself better or be better. And flash forward 30 years, and through a lot of therapy, I've kind of been able to sort of unfold a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I don't know, that's probably the one word that would best describe me, is maybe lonely and probably not very social, which is bizarre because I think across LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and different social networks, I probably have a few 100,000 followers,
right? It's amazing.
Which I share a lot of content with. So I come across really social, but I'm secretly just an extroverted introvert. But yeah, so I don't know, I grew up in Sydney, Australia. I didn't really focus all that much on school up until year 11 and 12, which are the 2 final years of high school in Australia. And I don't know what it was, but something just kind of clicked in my mind. And I was like, I really want to get a really good GPA because I want to be able to get into any university in the world. And so I worked my butt off and I got a 4.0 and
wow.
And then went to university for a year, and I was a bit burnt out at university. And then I took a couple of years off from studying to be an international flight attendant, which is kind of random.
That's pretty cool.
Really fun. Helped me save up and buy my first kind of investment property back when I was 19. Yeah, and then I don't know. I can jump into kind of like then the career stuff, or happy to answer more questions on the growing up, or wherever you want to take it, Brandon.
No, that's good. That's good. Let's pause in there just for 30 seconds, then we'll hop into some career stuff. But you mentioned in your child, you mentioned the word lonely, and you've talked about in a lot of the content you put out around mental health in the workplace, and how it shaped you professionally. Can you talk a little bit about that, because you're really passionate about it? And I think that's probably a good place to start, because you talked about how some of the events in your childhood had and shaped you up until who you are today. Can you just give us a little bit more about that, and how it shaped you as to who you are right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think mental health is just something that, I think it impacts everyone to some degree. Some people have good mental health, some people have poor mental health, and I think like everyone will experience poorer mental health at certain times of their lives. I think like for me and my family anyways, like there's definitely like a genetic component, because my mom's mom, like there's quite a significant amount of like depression and suicidality in our family. So I think like some of my own like experiences growing up, as well as, some of just like my genetics, I think predisposes me to have more issues in that space, which I think I used to view as like a problem, but now I just view it actually as something that needs to be trained in the same way like I train my body by going to the gym. I train my mind by going to therapy and doing different therapeutic modalities. And so, I don't know, I think growing up like as an only child and experiencing bullying when I was like in primary school, just sort of like, I think like your attachment to, your friends, your attachment to your family, your attachment to these like key kind of figures in your early years is really paramount in your formation of the world and relationships, and whether or not when you interact with someone, whether you are going to over-index for them being trustworthy, or you're going to over-index for them being someone that's going to take advantage of you or whatnot. So, I think for like the, very good half of like my career, I was definitely the latter. So I kind of unconsciously anyways viewed everyone around me as like a potential bully. And so that meant that I was super competitive and was always kind of thinking about like how people around me were going to, I don't know, like get in my way or take me down or stab me in the back, which sounds like really dramatic. And it wasn't like I was like going through my jobs and literally thinking that and like, and like planning behind the scenes. But I think like what I've learned through therapy now is that like, I think, and in some ways, like I think I've grown a lot of empathy actually towards those parts of me that felt that way and still sometimes do feel that way, because they were defensive and they were protective, right? Like they protected me when I was young by not kind of trusting people, or like kids when I was younger. It protected me from, enduring more bullying. But once I was no longer at school and in university and at work, where that doesn't really ever happen all that much, still sometimes happens, but not all that much, it's definitely less helpful of a strategy. But so I think that kind of shaped me in some ways and meant that like I focused more on, and I'll talk about it a bit later, but like I think in career success, you really need to focus on relationships and results, the two R's.
Yep. Good one.
And I think it probably meant for me that earlier on in my career, I over-indexed on results. And I think now I do a better job at equally indexing between results and relationships.
That's great. That's a really good framework for people to think about. Thank you. And then I really appreciate you sharing all of that as well. We're lucky enough to know each other personally and professionally, which is really cool. So I wish we had 3 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours to talk about this stuff right now. So that's actually a really good segue. You mentioned getting into university and then getting into your first few gigs and over-indexing on results. Can you walk us through some of your just walk us through your professional jumps and the roles that you've had, maybe in 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'll hop into a couple questions about some of the superpowers I know that you have and some of the things you've written about as well, so we can get a little bit more of your mindset.
Sure. Yeah. So I basically started my career in tech started at Microsoft. So I entered Microsoft through their kind of I forget what it was called, but it was basically their accelerator program, their leadership program. Microsoft either hires people that are kind of fresh out of university that they identify as folks with leadership potential and they fast track them to management, or they hire people like with 10 plus years of experience. Microsoft almost exclusively never hires anyone with from like 1 to 9 years.
Right.
So I entered through like that leadership track. And that was sort of like my first exposure to marketing. I always knew I wanted to be a CMO, and weirdly, I always knew I wanted to be a CMO before 30. But so yeah, I started my career at Microsoft, and then after spending some time there and learning a lot about B2C marketing, a company called ExactTarget, which was based out of Indianapolis in the US, was growing internationally, and Microsoft was a really big user of ExactTarget's email marketing platform, of which I was a user. And so when they launched in Asia Pacific, they hired me as their first partnerships marketer. So I then joined ExactTarget and spent a few years of ExactTarget. And there, I really was able to move up in both experience and in leadership. And so, I built out a big team there across Asia Pacific while I was at ExactTarget. And then ExactTarget was acquired by Salesforce. So I was able to then spend a few years at Salesforce running their marketing for Asia Pacific. Again, a really remarkable, super innovative company, but quite a bit smaller than a little bit bigger than ExactTarget, but quite a bit smaller than Microsoft. And so I was running all of their B2B marketing. At ExactTarget, Salesforce, I was able to really refine, I would say, my enterprise B2B marketing playbooks. Mm-hmm. So, how do you work with sales to create net new sales opportunities for sales, as well as nurture and accelerate existing sales opportunities to move them through the sales process faster. So it's very low, very high touch, kind of like low volume sort of game, the enterprise B2B playbook. Yep. And so I'd done it for, quite a few years and really enjoyed it, but I felt like I had really pushed it to its extreme. And at that time I was really interested in a company called HubSpot because I was fascinated by how they were doing marketing and I loved their product. And so I then moved to HubSpot and was the first marketing hire in APAC, and then built out their APAC marketing team across Sydney, Singapore, Japan. And what I loved about HubSpot and what was really important to me in my journey was that HubSpot was still B2B marketing, but it was B2B at scale, right? So we were selling our software platform, which was an all-in-one marketing and sales platform, to small and medium businesses. I think the average sale was about $1,000 per month for HubSpot. And so when you're selling a product like that, it's less about high touch and more about high volume. And so that was really important to me because, eventually I still do want to start my own company. And while I love the enterprise playbook that I use at ExactTarget and Salesforce, when you're throwing big events and doing a lot of that high touch, high hand holding sort of activities, it's really expensive, right? We're talking millions of dollars. Right. Whereas at HubSpot, we had much tighter budgets because we were much more focused on ROI focused marketing. And, the biggest driver and the most effective driver for ROI-focused marketing in B2B and in B2C, actually, in a lot of senses, is content marketing. It takes a little bit more time than some of the other strategies, but once you build up traffic from content, the leads and the MQLs and the revenue just keeps flowing. So I think probably prior to G2, my time at HubSpot, those 3 years, was the most proud time of my life. It was also really challenging, but I learned so much in that first year about how to do scalable marketing. So I'm so grateful to have worked there and just genuinely love the team there so much. I then moved over from Sydney to the US with HubSpot to run their global marketing in the sense of digital, social, brand campaigns, PR. And that was kind of fun because it exposed me to another part of marketing that I didn't have as much exposure to in APAC. Yep. A little under 2 years ago, I then moved to G2. And the reason why I wanted to move to G2 was that I think, I love B2B, but I think eventually I realistically want to get back to B2C or a B2B/B2C role. And what I love about G2 and a lot of the most innovative businesses today, like Uber, like Airbnb, they're all marketplaces. As is G2. Yeah, and they're really fascinating and super complex and difficult. But I wanted that challenge. I think, if you look at kind of my roles from moving at B2C at Microsoft to enterprise B2B to like SMB B2B, like I don't like it when I'm comfortable because I don't feel like I'm learning. And I find it takes me a year to basically, without sounding like an arrogant douchebag, it takes me like a year to become an expert at something, I think. So, my first year at G2, I was hopeless maybe. First year at HubSpot, it wasn't hopeless, but I mean, I didn't feel like I could add as much value necessarily as the other marketers on the team who'd been there longer. And I find typically it takes me 6 to 12 months to learn everything from that industry and that company and the existing people on the team. And then at the 6 to 12 month point, I'm able to kind of have a bit more of an integrative understanding of what we should do next because of all of the experiences that I've had. And so, I always find that when I do my best work is from years 1 to 3, the end of years 1 to 3, so 2 or 3. Yeah.
Very cool. That's actually amazing to know about yourself. Not many people really have that self-reflection, understanding of like where their best work comes from, how long it takes them to be good at something, what the expectation is of themselves, and how to manage that. That's great. You've gone. I've always been so impressed by your career for a lot of reasons. Like, you've accomplished more in a shorter space of time than most, and at really high velocity. But a lot of people that do that, they're usually a T, as in they usually have a lot of they have very thin breadth across a lot of things, but a lot of depth in one thing. You have depth in so many things across the sales and marketing spectrum because your unique set of circumstances, but that you both put yourself in and that you were put in for the roles and responsibilities that you've had. All the way across, operations and digital and sales development. You actually mentioned that your job is part marketer and part salesperson in one of your articles, and I think that that's just a true testament to your background, your experiences to have that mindset. But one of the things I want to talk about right now, you just mentioned all the amazing businesses you'd worked with. I want to talk about talent and how you think about attracting, pipelining, hiring, retaining great employees. So you and I both subscribe to the same mindset, I believe, it's from the content that you've put out there and from having conversations, that talent and hiring is the number one priority for every business and should be for every single hiring manager as the CEO of that hiring process. So always be pipelining, even and especially when you're not hiring, so you can get rock stars on your team regardless of having readily available headcount or budget, regardless of having those things open. So let's break those things down, attract, pipeline, hire, and retain. You talk about in some of your content, I think it was in entrepreneur.com article, you talk about not just thinking about sales and marketing from an inbound perspective, but thinking about recruiting, hiring, and attracting talent from an inbound perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that mindset and how you apply that to the way that you hire talent?
Sure. Yeah, so I think the reality is, and the way I think kind of about recruiting is, most people that are actively looking for a job are actively looking because they're probably not good at their job. And that's like the reality. And people that are good at their job, they don't look for jobs. Like, they're constantly kind of, they're working hard. They're doing a great job for the company that they're at. And it's like businesses that intrigue them that they might want to speak to. So, I'm at a loss for words for the exact word that I described this. And I did a talk on this once at a big HR conference in Singapore. But it's like you've got people that are like actively in the process, and then you've got your like inactive folks. And your active folks make up something like 10% of the pool, and inactive or like kind of dormant candidates, which again, that's not the right word for it, but
passive,
make up like 90% of your passive candidates are making up like, they're the best candidates, but they're not the ones coming to job boards and looking for you. And so you really need to be focused on how do you attract them. And so I'm a really big believer in for really key talent, you need to be proactively meeting and building relationships and learning about people and what they're doing and working on. And so I probably do, I interview about, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 people a week, sometimes for roles that I don't even have opened. And when I say interview, that's a very loose term. It's more so 50% of those might be official interviews. 50% of them are literally just coffee catch-ups where I've sent a note to, let's say, the head of PR at a big marketplace. I won't say this because I have spoken to someone recently in that space. And I'm like, hey, I absolutely love the PR that you're doing at your company. Like, I read a few of these stories and they're fascinating. Would love to just sync up marketer to marketer and like see if we could learn from each other and just, chat. And I genuinely actually do just want to like get to know these people and learn about them. And all of the best hires I've ever made have been passive candidates because it's based off of their work, not like them being actively in the cycle. So whenever I see like a great company running a great campaign, I'll look at like, okay, who runs campaigns at that company? And I'll then like, stalk them on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and slide into their DMs and work out a way to meet with them because, I'm genuinely interested in their craft. And it's not a sales pitch because I am genuinely interested. And so they can see that and they get it. And that's sort of how I open up. That's how I like to fill the funnel right now. That's not to say I don't work with like a recruiter. I have like a recruiter here at G2 that's constantly hiring roles for me. But most of like my director and above level roles, I rarely hire, not because I choose to, but I find that most people that I will hire at director or VP level will be folks that I have found myself. Because I think that if you're a passive candidate, and I get emails all the time from recruiters, and I'm passive and I'm not looking for a new job, but I rarely respond to them. But if a CMO or a CEO in another company that I was really interested in reached out and said, "Hey, love what you've been doing at G2 and how you've completely changed the brand and how you've grown traffic, and I listened to you on a podcast, would love to catch up." That's something that I'm like, yeah, I mean, YOLO. Like, I want to meet other smart folks, and I like to hear that the things that I'm doing are getting noticed selfishly, and so so that sort of thing that works, and so that's how I think about kind of like recruiting. I'm pretty process oriented. I mean, if it's when I'm going after a candidate, a passive candidate, I'm a little less process driven because it's very much like I'm just looking for great people out there. When I'm in a director level or below interview, when someone's like in our active recruiting cycle, and whether or not like we've found them or they've found us, I kind of use a bit of like a case-based method for how I interview. So I kind of basically like start off the interview like where I want to learn a bit more about them, but then I ask them a pretty simple question of what were you brought into your company to impact? And so this just helps me really quickly like understand if they give me a really long kind of answer or they can't answer that, like it just shows me that they don't really know what they or their role is in their company. So I'll ask them that to kind of understand. So if I can, if someone asked me that at G2, I'd say, well, I was brought into G2 to drive more sales revenue, increase our brand, and drive more traffic.
Yep.
And then I then follow with like a specific task. So I ask them like, can you please describe like the task or the challenge or the project or the problem that you were brought in to solve? So they might say, well, I was brought in to increase our MQL to, SQL conversion rate or blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of like will then ask them, okay, like whatever they say there, I'll ask them, how did you measure your success on that thing? And then they might say, and this is like the worst response ever, they might say, like, I wish I could measure it, but my company doesn't really care to measure those things. And then I would kind of dig in further of like, oh, okay, that's okay. Like, let's say your company did measure things. How would you want them to be measured? And that way I can work out, like, is their brain thinking about measurement the right way? And then after I kind of understand the measurability component, I then go into action. So like, what projects or tasks did you specifically work on to reach success? And what that helps me understand is like, did they actually do the job? Right. Because, companies have lots of successes.
Right.
We as a marketing team have done a ton of success, and we talk about it as a team. So it would be easy for someone to kind of take ownership or pretend that they drove the success of the team or something else. So this actions thing is important to me because it helps me understand, like from start to finish, like what was their involvement? Did they partner with someone? Where did the idea come from? Did they hit roadblocks? That's kind of really key. And then I'll ask them, what results were actually achieved. And then I'll kind of go into time frames. So how long did it take to get here? And, scale around what would they maybe do differently or would they do it again or not? And so that's just like really quickly at a high level, kind of the case sort of flow I like to go through when I'm interviewing a candidate that has a, core set of skills that I'm trying to get deep into and understand how they think. Separate to that, though, I think like for me, I really care about people that are data driven, growth focused. So that they have experience in growing things, and the data stuff, the growth stuff, that will come through in this kind of case method that I use. I want people that are lifelong learners, that are obsessed with. If you want to work on my team and you aren't on social media and you aren't obsessed with how ads work and how tracking works and how digital works, like this isn't the right team for you. So I can tell from a lot of their online presences already whether or not they're probably going to be right for me. That's kind of high level how I think about the actual like nitty gritty process of it. And then when it comes to retention and like growing employees, I have a pretty kind of like direct approach where like I connect with most people on the team every other month. I connect with obviously all my direct reports every week, but I try and, encourage them to really understand that transparency is the most important thing to me. And I try and mirror that to them. And by being really transparent with them and sharing with them, what I am working on, what I'm finding challenging, why I can't do what someone has asked me to do, and why I'm giving them the logic. And I think today with employees, they crave to understand why you as a leader make the decisions you make. I think, for a long time, leadership decisions were made, behind closed doors and people were just told what to do. And I think, Gen-wise and most employers, I think now just in today's workforce, kind of want to be involved and want to be able to share their opinion. And I'm really encouraging about But I also explain that this isn't a democracy. And, I want everyone to share their opinion so that I can make the best decision. And I might make a decision that's different to what you want, but that doesn't mean that I won't listen to you and respect your opinion, but I have to make a decision at the end of the day. And I might have a broader perspective than you because I'm getting all of your input and I have all the input from my job and being on a leadership team that you may not have. So yeah, that's kind of really quickly, I guess, how I think about recruiting, like interviewing, and then kind of developing and retaining employees.
That was great. You did my job for me. I mean, all the way down to the method and the process you use, some of the questions you asked, the examples you gave. I really like what you said around the vulnerability and transparency of communication, openness of communication within your team. You write about that and some of the things you write about making sure that people can feel
and I really think, I think I can always keep doing a better job. Like, this is something that I need to work on. And partly it's something that I've needed to really focus on consciously because it's so different than my style a few years ago. And I think that's part of, through a lot of therapy and a lot of my own work, I've realized that, some of those defenses that I used to have as a child that were helpful then weren't helpful as an adult and as a leader in business. And so I've had to develop there further. But I think it was, this is just a bit of not a sad story, but, I had a colleague yesterday who I love. They're on my team. They're amazing. Who we were meeting for a one-on-one, and they texted me and they said, let's see if I have the message. It was what is it? It was here it is. Hey, it was basically long story short, it was hey, Ryan, I'm really sorry. I'm not going to be able to make our one-on-one right now. I think I'm having a panic attack, and I might head home. And naturally I was like, please, do what you need to do and take care of yourself. And I don't think an employee would have sent that to me previously. They might have said, I'm out sick or something.
Right.
But, I have said to my employees in the past, over Slack, when I was having an anxiety attack at some point, I just canceled all my meetings that day and took a mental health day pretty publicly and was like, I'm out today, guys. I'm taking a mental health day. And I was in the office and I had to go home because I just wasn't feeling it. And the amount of people that texted me after that to say that they appreciated me being so public with that kind of helped them feel like they could bring their whole selves to work. And if they are feeling similarly, they don't need to lie about how they feel. They can just be open. And not to say that they have to, but I think, again, it's all about sort of, living it yourself and showing others that they can do the same thing.
Totally. Setting the standard, demonstrating the standard so that you can hold the standard. I talked to someone about that, about culture the other day, and I believe it's the exact same thing with mental health in the workplace and openness of communication. That's a really good example. Thanks for sharing that. And you keep that openness from a retention perspective. I think the openness that you keep with the way that you talk to your employees and the way that you talk to your teams it sounds like from the way that you're writing. The example here, I read an article that you'd written the other day. I read the other day that you'd written talking about encouraging your best employees to consider outside job offers and having that very open dialogue and open discussion. Can you talk a little bit about that mindset and what that means to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think part of it is that, too many leaders and people in business tiptoe around the idea that, people are going to work with a company forever, right? And I think the reality is that that the average lifespan of a marketer at a company is, 2 years maybe. And so for my track record, it's 3 years on average.
I read the other day something like those coming out of college right now are poised to have something like 13.2 employers throughout their life.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm really open with people because if you look at my track record, I have done the same. And so what I really want to encourage people to do is if someone reaches out to you for a job offer because they think you're a good fit for a role, you should respond. I mean, assuming you want to, you don't have to, but you should. And I do this. I would always respond to them. So recruiters hit me up all the time. They'll be like, hey, Ryan, I have a CMO role or CEO role at this super sexy, high growth company, blah, blah, blah. My first message back, I have no niceties. I'm like, thanks for your message. What is the company? Because that's all I care about, right? Who is the company that we're talking about? Because there's heaps of roles out there, but, I don't want to work for anyone. And so once they tell me who the company is, then if it's an interesting company, I might chat to them or the leadership team to learn a bit more. And I think why that's important is because it helps me solidify to myself if I am in the right role myself, by chatting to someone else and seeing what other roles are available. And by asking questions, I can work out oh gosh, no, in my role today, wow, I'm so much happier. But it also helps me have a baseline understanding of, what roles are out there, what are the typical skill sets that are needed, how much are people paying for my skill set, which helps give me visibility into do I need to be asking for more money at my current company or am I paid fairly? And so I think if you treat your employees really, really well, and be open and honest with them in that, like, they're not probably going to work for you forever, and that you want the best for them in their career, because you understand that they'll then be an advocate for you and your company afterwards, they're a little bit more open about these things. And so, I kind of just do that with my team, and I practice what I preach. And so it kind of means that encourages folks to feel open about, like, they can come to us and say, hey, I have this job over from this company. I don't necessarily want to leave, but they're offering me double what you guys are offering me. And if this is an employee that's amazing that, like, we couldn't do without them, we'll try and do whatever we can to keep them. And that might mean more responsibilities if they've shown that they deserve it. It might mean more pay. It depends on why the person's making the decision, right? And that's case kind of by case. But I think you can get a better understanding of that, and help them see also as well by asking them questions about the role and the company. I oftentimes find that, like, I will uncover things that they don't know or haven't realized. Like, they haven't asked, like, how much budget they might have, or who their boss is going to be, or, if they were told that they could run a team, but, like, is it going to be in writing that they will get to run the team? And just these things that, like, they haven't asked. And, like, they start to then realize, holy shit, I have so much more potential and bandwidth here on Ryan's team. Yes, the grass might seem greener on the other side because they're offering more money, but there's a reason why they're offering more money. It's because they can't get good talent. So I don't know. And by doing that, they may realize that, yep, they should leave or not. And so, I think I preface always these conversations with my team with a bit of an asterisk, in the sense of that, like, you might go through that process and come to us and say that there is this offer that you're going to take. We might say to you, if we don't feel like you are contributing well on the team, or you're not someone that we want to change the situation for, like, you should take the role.
Take it.
No, exactly. And so, like,
that's best case scenario for everybody too. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. You should take that role, like, because we think that you are paid fairly. And, as per your last performance review, we've made it pretty clear to you in terms of what you would need to do to get to the next level. And you haven't done that yet. So, we're happy for you to stay here and keep developing you. But if it's money that you want, you're not going to get that here until you put in the work that we've shown you. And I think just from having that dialogue, they can better understand, like, how much more quality coaching and development they're going to get with you than at another company. And they can then make their own decisions. So that's how I try and think about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the multiple layers you went into with that. And you've been at so many businesses where you've had just amazing people at those businesses, built awesome cultures. I think one of the things that people want to hear about is how you think about talent. We just talked about that. And then also a couple things around the science of what you've done. So building inbound marketing engines, you've been at the mecca of inbound at HubSpot. And if I could count, I couldn't even count on two hands how many amazing people I know at HubSpot and how many reasons I love the culture there, as well as love the products. And so even people outside the business feel that way. But tell us what you learned at HubSpot about building inbound marketing engines that translates to G2 and how you've built that engine right now, as well as every subsequent marketing engine you're going to build. Like, what translates that everyone should be doing as they're building their inbound engine?
Gosh, okay. So I mean, as you mentioned, working for HubSpot is, taught me everything that I know about inbound. And that was actually kind of when I mentioned before why I was so grateful for working there, was I just was able to work with the smartest marketing minds, and I just fucking love that team and miss them so much. They're a big customer of ours at G2 actually, and I got the chance to head back to Boston last month because we recorded this amazing customer success video with their CEO, Brian Halligan, and Kip Bodnar, their CMO. Cool. And they were talking about kind of all the value that they get from G2 and why they couldn't connect with their customers if it wasn't for G2. And so it was so fun to kind of go back there and profile this company that I was so proud to have worked at, and that, was a big customer of ours. So it was really quite nice. But nice. Look, I think what I learned there is that, HubSpot kind of like literally wrote the book on inbound marketing. And so, I think what I learned about was just how to take a really data-driven approach to creating content that drives results. And I think, blogging and writing content marketing is something that can be done really, most people do it horribly wrong, because everyone can write. So everyone thinks they can be a blogger or a content marketer, and they can, and anyone can actually write good content if they have the right training or if they use the right assistance tools. The problem where I think most people go wrong with content marketing is, once you've decided what you're writing about, if it's not the right topic, you can't optimize it for something whereby no one searches for that topic. So optimization, like SEO optimization when it comes to content marketing, happens before topics are even selected, before like pen touches the paper. And that's why I have, my VP of content and SEO is an SEO by trade. He
Cool.
ran SEO at Atlassian and now leads SEO and content for us at G2. And the reason being is, you need to look at you need to start with keyword research and work out, okay, where are people searching and which searches indicate that this person is our persona that we are trying to attract to our website, blog, etc. And then you need to work out, okay, how high quality are the keywords in relation to the persona? Is 50% of the traffic that we're going to get for this keyword with 1 million searches going to be our buyer persona? And if so, that means 500,000 of the 1 million is going to be our traffic. Or alternatively, there could be a 700,000 term per monthly searches that has a 90% alignment to your buyer persona, which is going to be higher than that 500,000. But if you just chose the biggest number, you might not get as much of the right people. And so we take a super data-driven approach. And we literally published just yesterday, I had the team publish a playbook, and it's like a 5-part playbook on learn.g2.com, which is our learning hub, which is literally the entire play-by-play that we created to create a blog at G2 just last year, around 7 months ago, that went from 0 visitors to over 1 million monthly visitors within 7 months or something like that.
Holy shit.
Insane growth, right? This blog now makes up, this blog is driving millions and millions of visitors, and it hasn't existed per month, I should add, and it hasn't existed for more than a year now. And which is, HubSpot's blog drives about 6 million monthly visitors, but HubSpot's been, working on that bad boy for about 10 years.
Wow, that's a great proportional perspective for how fast that's grown.
And I mean, we're on track to hit 4 million monthlies by the end of this year. That's the goal that I set the team. For the blog alone, our total website will be at about 10 million monthlies by the end of this year. And when I joined G2, our traffic was around, it was less than 1 million a month. So to go from in 2 years to go from less than 1 million monthly visitors to 10 million, which is where we're on track for, that's fucking insanity, right?
It's literally 10x. I mean, that's insane.
And that's not just my work. It's not just the marketing team's work. We have a great product team that we work with. We have lots of contributing content writers that create content, but majority of that traffic's all organic as well, I should add. We don't do any paid content. And so, yeah, that's one thing that I'm really freaking proud about, because, and that's, I mentioned earlier relationships and results. Relationships are super important, but results are as well. I think, you said I was able to fast track my career. I got the CMO role at G2 when I was 29. I couldn't have done that if it wasn't for really over indexing on results. And what I mean there is if you tell me to hit 1 million monthly visitors, I'll hit 4. And it's not because I'm trying to show off or anything. It's basically because I derive a lot of self-worth from my work achievements. And, over time I'm getting better at disconnecting and finding self-worth from, who I am as a person, regardless of job. But, that's still something that's really important to me. And so I'm kind of thankful for that part and for that lonely boy role that I played when I was younger, because it helped get me here. And I don't think I would change it looking back.
Wow, that's an excellent answer. I love it. I hope everyone. I don't think people could write down notes fast enough as they're listening to that. So can we dive in one more layer on that? So 2 things. One, what are the phases you go through as you're thinking about building a strategy for 1 year or 2 years? If I'm listening to this as a head of marketing or head of sales and marketing, and I'm thinking about what are the phases I'm going to go through? You've directed this movie multiple times. So what are the phases you go through as you're building a strategy? And then 2, what does your scorecard look like so that you know how to measure it?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess it could be a bit different depending on if you've been doing content marketing for a while, or if you're just starting out, it's slightly different. If you've been doing it for a while, and I wrote a big blog post for an Entrepreneur magazine called The One Marketing Metric That You're Not Measuring, which kind of outlines this process in more detail. If anyone Googles the one marketing metric you're not measuring and my name, they'll find it. But basically, if you've already been creating content for a while, step 1 would be export all of your Google Analytics data, map it and connect it to your CRM data, and work out which blog posts are driving the most organic traffic and what's the conversion rate of that traffic into leads, and then leads into MQLs, and MQLs into revenue. And then you can start to connect what content topics that I'm writing about. They give me think of HubSpot, right? One content topic that they might write about is marketing automation. Another content topic they might write about is social media. Another content topic they might write about is marketing budgets. Because, all of those things are things that a marketer would be searching for, and they sell to a marketer, right? And so, you would then group all of your content and pages around those topics and see, okay, in the aggregate, how much traffic has the social media content driven to our blog organically? How much of those organic visitors to social media content have been converted into leads, etc. And you can start to work out what content topics are driving the most revenue at the bottom of the funnel. Yeah, does that kind of make sense?
Yep.
Connecting the two?
Yep.
And then, so that would be what I would recommend you do if you've already got a lot of content, you are driving organic traffic, and you want to get a bit of an understanding of what is and isn't working. Yep. If you're just starting out fresh, and you can still, and then once you've done that, you then can still do what I'm going to suggest now. But if you are starting out fresh, then what I would suggest is just, you know your buyer persona better than anyone. Think about, like, sit down and think about, what does this person do in their day-to-day life? And like, if I use the HubSpot example again of, the marketing persona that we were trying to attract, I don't just think about their job in the context of my software. So what I mean by that is, yes, HubSpot's platform does email marketing and social media. So there were two of the topics that I touched on before. HubSpot product does nothing around budgeting, but we still created content around that topic because that was something that a marketer needs help with. They create budgets, they go to Google and they search for budget templates. Yep. So it's not just about creating contents that are like close to your product. It's about creating content around topics that your buyer persona would be searching for, regardless of whether or not they are looking for your product at that moment in time. Okay. And that's a really important piece, because if you just create content topics around the things that are in relation to your product or service, they're way more competitive typically than other topics, because that's the simple dumb marketer thing to do. Sorry, that's a bit mean. I shouldn't say the dumb marketer thing to do. That's just like the thing that everyone does naturally. You don't have to be very creative to think about doing that. And so, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but you should be thinking broader as well. I feel bad now for saying dumb marketer. But,
I think people will forgive you based on all the value you're bringing, so don't worry about it.
And so once you start to look into those different topics, that's when you start to do keyword research and using tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs. But I mean, ideally, come to G2 and search for the best SEO software, and we'll give you personalized recommendations. And then you can start to kind of look at some content tools that are out there and group these different topics to see what kind of volume of people are searching for the topics. How difficult is it to rank for these topics? So, most of the different platforms will give a difficulty score of 1 to 100, 100 meaning it's impossible. You are never going to rank for this unless you are Facebook.com to 1, any person that launches a new website can rank for it. And so, you want to choose a mixture of difficult terms because they typically have higher volume, and a mixture of some easier terms because they typically have a lower volume. And the easier terms are good because they start to drive immediate traffic to your site because you can rank for them quickly. But also, once you start driving organic traffic, then you start to kind of create the flywheel effect whereby, okay, all these new people that are reading your content are going to enter your subscription process, and then they'll be return visitors through email marketing, as well as, they're probably creating, if they're marketers and that's who you're attracting, they probably have their own blogs. If they really liked what you wrote about, they might link to you. And then if they link to you, that helps you increase your domain authority, which then helps you rank for more difficult terms. So, you want to be doing both. And I think that's a mistake that we made early on at G2.
Okay.
And it was my fault, was that, I joined from HubSpot and we had a domain authority of 92 out of 100 at HubSpot. And so when I joined G2, I think we had a domain authority only of around 80. So, some of the terms that I wanted the team to go after very early on were just too difficult. And so we didn't drive any traffic to them until like 6 months later. And the team was smart enough to say, hey, while we've created some of this really difficult high volume content, we need to do some easier content that's going to be a quicker win in the meantime to get the flywheel going, to get Google noticing our site. So I feel like I know I explained that really quickly just then, but I know we have a limited time, and I could talk about this literally for about 24 hours. Like, there's so many details to this, and it seriously, like, if anyone wants this like step for step, they should just go learn.g2.com because we published the playbook for this yesterday.
Awesome. Do you remember, for the audience, do you remember what the top or title was? That's right. You know what? Send it to me after. The title of it, I think the title of it is literally how we grow our organic traffic to 1 million monthly visits. Okay,
visitors.
Sweet. Very original title. That's good. And for everyone listening, I'll put the link in the description of this of this episode to send it over. Hey, last thing I want to talk about, because I know we do have limited time, is one more superpower that I think is really clear to everyone that both follows you on social, understands how your career trajectory has gone, as well as the businesses that you've helped build, is around brand building. You just went to Cannes Lions, and you wrote a LinkedIn article about it being a big chance for B2B marketers to learn from top B2C marketing strategies. And you talked about B2B brand building a little bit in that. You also have on social media, you're following, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I mean, I couldn't believe the numbers that I was looking at. I mean, I could, but I couldn't at the same time. And that you have 21,000 fans on Facebook, 56,000 followers on Instagram, 20,000 followers on Twitter, 32,000 followers on LinkedIn. Every single one of those platforms is extremely challenging to get even close to a fraction of that, let alone have that consistency. So could you talk a little bit about building brand from a B2B perspective and then also from a social perspective, or you can marry those two things together however you think about it. But I think a lot of people are going to struggle with building their B2B brand because of, like you mentioned, B2B is so far behind B2C and being able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think B2B marketers are traditionally the worst at building brands. And it's because B2B, typically it's when you're selling to businesses, you're typically selling a higher value product. It's very logical, rational. You're solving a very specific problem, which means that kind of because it's so sales driven, because sales focuses time on those pain points with prospects, marketing just seems to always be quite clinical and boring and corporate. So the reason why I went to Cannes was because I think the B2C world do a much better job when it comes to CPG, right? Consumer packaged goods and fast moving products. It's far less logical and rational, and it's far more emotional and gut and instinctual. And so their content and campaigns are always very visceral. They're very much about kind of making you feel a certain way. They're about surprising you, delighting you, making you laugh, making you cry. And I don't necessarily think that B2B should go completely down that path. But I think as a CMO, it would be silly of me not to. It would be dumb of me. Here we go. I'll pay myself out to make up for my last comment. It would be dumb of me not to go to that event at least once, because there's stuff that I can learn from that industry. And I think that's kind of actually, funnily, now that we talk about it, like a very good proof of what I said before is that like I am obsessed with learning from other people and other industries, selfishly because I want to steal all of their great ideas and apply them to my world. And integrate them better than anyone else. And I think I genuinely do a pretty good job at like understanding many aspects of marketing more than I think other CMOs that have just kind of stayed in one lane. And it's because I just pushed myself out of my comfort zone. Yeah. But so I don't think B2B CMOs do a very good job at that. And I don't think, we have done a very good job at that at G2. And so, I want to kind of upskill myself so that I can help upskill my team, etc. But I think, if you look at software today, right, there is something like 60,000 pieces of B2B software out there. There's something like 250, maybe 1,000 different email marketing platforms. And so in the B2B space, B2B used to be a differentiator. So B2B software, SaaS, used to be, I think, a thing that could differentiate you in terms of winning or losing. If you were a company that got in on SaaS and software early, that gave you an unfair advantage. And I think today, everyone uses software. Everyone uses 50 different pieces of just email marketing software alone. The software is less the differentiator today, and it's how you use the software. And so once you kind of move into a parity market where you're selling products that are similar to everyone else's, and not all software categories are like this. CRM certainly is. Email marketing certainly is. Social media is kind of like that. These kind of categories where there's tons of different options, they're all kind of similar. People, when they're making the decision, they're going to lean more into some of the emotive components, because if your products are all the same, who wouldn't want to work with the brand that's a bit more fun and is a bit more enjoyable and they like more? And so that's kind of my thoughts on B2B branding. And that's why we at G2 went through a rebrand earlier this year where we dropped the crowd from our name. So we're just G2 now. We completely redid our logo, our brand colors, but it was more than just a visual refresh. It was more actually that we as a company changed our mission and our focus and shifted because we understood our buyers a little bit more. So that's kind of what I would say on the B2B branding side of the house. On the B2C, on the personal brand and building your own brand on social, I think, I talked about this at Drift's conference last year. I keynoted there and spoke about kind of how to build your career and your brand. And I think sometimes people feel embarrassed to toot their own horn, and it doesn't need to be like that. But I think the way I've always viewed it is that, the bigger my clout as a person, as a marketer, the more interesting I am to people, so that they follow me, that they want to interview me, that they talk to me, they allow me to talk at events, the more valuable I am to an employer, because 100%. I already have 100%. A platform to talk to people, right? So, if you think of me in my current role, right, when I go into my next role at my next company, which no idea when that will happen because I love G2, I published content for, HBR, for the World Economic Forum, there's so many publications now. Entrepreneur, I have all of these Business connections Insider. There because they trust me and they know that I'm not writing salesy content. I'm exposing, my flaws and talking about wins. And, and I'm giving their writers something of value. And so when I go to my next company, now immediately I have this Rolodex of companies that I can, write for. And now, in all the bios, it's going to say Ryan is the CMO, CEO, et cetera, of this new company. And I'll naturally, I'm a marketer, so I'll naturally like pull in a very natural, lovely way, like a mention of that company that's super authentic to what I'm writing about, obviously. And yeah, it's a win-win. And so I think my lesson on for folks listening that are like, yeah, okay, well, it's easy to kind of like get press when you're a CMO, and write for these companies. Like when I wasn't a CMO, I still was doing it. You just have to start smaller. And so the step-by-step process that I told people to do is, you probably already work for a company. So, tap on your content marketing team's door and say, hey guys, hey gals, I would love to create some content for our company blog. And no content marketer is going to say no to that because they have really big traffic goals and they want more content. And so then, hey, like what topics do you guys need content around? And let's see if I can find a crossover of where I have a skill set and where you need content. And then, work with them, publish some content, publish more content. That helps get you on the map. And then you then might get noticed by someone and someone might ask you to write for them. But now at least you can proactively reach out to tier 3 publications and say, hey, I write for insert company publication and here are a few links to some of my work. I just recently wrote this piece of content about topic X, which I think would be a really good fit for your audience. I've pasted it in the email below. Let me know what you think and if you publish it. And that just kind of gets you up and running, And so if that person doesn't reply, try another tier 3 publication. And that's genuinely how I did it. And then I went from tier 3 to tier 2. And then when I started creating content for tier 1, I referenced my tier 2 work. And, you just kind of slowly work your way up. And then after a while, you don't need to reference it anymore because people will just Google your name and they'll see all of the content, and that's the proof kind of thing. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. You've been doing this for so long, personally and professionally.
Well, the only thing I would add as well, Brandon, is that like I think for the biggest asterisk on all this before, and it's kind of like, I mentioned with content marketing, if you don't have the right keyword and topic idea from the get-go, you will fail. With building your personal brand and writing content, if you aren't like authentic and if you don't have something unique to say, that's key. No one's going to publish your bullshit. Like, if I wrote a blog, that blog post that I wrote for Harvard Business Review about like why I tell my best employees to seek other job offers, if I wrote like why I love to run one-on-one meetings, like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Of course, like, we all know that's important. Like, oh, Ryan has a different view on, career progression and letting people leave. That is interesting. So that's where you need to be a marketer, and you need to think about storytelling. You need to think about your unique skill set and how you can, tell a story that people will want to read. Because I think if you don't have that from the beginning, that no one will ever reply to you, and this won't work for you.
Love it. Unique and authentic. I've heard that over and over from a few different businesses that are great at, people that are great at it. Like, you've just been doing it for so long. That's extremely valuable, and thank you for the examples and all the detail. You're running short on time right now. I want to get one rapid fire question in, and then we'll wrap. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, cool. So this is a question, and I explain this to guests each time. This is a question I usually ask people on their birthdays. Your birthday's not till October 3rd, I believe, and we both have October birthdays, so I got excited when I saw that, but it's not creepy. Maybe it is that I know that. But anyways, the question I always ask is, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned in the last 12 months personally?
The most valuable lesson I think that I've learned in the last 12 months.
Personally. We'll get to professional in a second.
Yeah, personally. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to go there anyways. Is probably to be kinder to myself. I think has probably been the biggest lesson that I've learned in the last 12 months. Because I think, this job and this challenge, which was bigger than I'd ever taken on, definitely pushed me to my limits last year. And, I think, and I'm in a really good place now, but I got pushed into, gotten pushed is maybe just like a defeatist way of saying it. Like I let myself get too stressed out or whatnot. But
right.
I'm as tough as I am on others around me, I'm 10 times as tough on myself. So like when that little Freudian slip of like dumb marketers means that like secretly, like I think that I am a dumb marketer. And that's like fact, like I deep down I'm insecure that I am that persona. But I think, I definitely learned over the last 12 months through a shit ton of therapy to just be kinder to myself. Cause everyone is fighting their own battles, and whether you can see it or not. And most oftentimes the folks that piss you off the most or that activate something in you have something deep going on inside of them, but that what you're seeing is just their defense mechanism to help them avoid dealing with whatever it is that they were trying to avoid. And I've been there. And so I don't know, I don't like succeed at being kind to myself and others every day, but I think it's something that I am actively working on.
Awesome. Be kinder to yourself. I actually need to steal one more thing because I feel like the extra 2 minutes is going to be worthy of the way that you feel after it, because you've given a lot of really good career advice. What's your best, what was, you were going to say, I think you were going to expand on it a little bit earlier, but what's some of your best career advice that you have for young professionals as they're navigating their career?
Well, I think my best kind of career advice for people today, young and old, would be that, we're really lucky today because of social media. It's so easy to find interesting people. And so kind of like I touched on before, in terms of what I do when it comes to recruiting, when you see a really cool ad, or if you think about the brands that you love or the companies that you want to work for, go onto LinkedIn, to Twitter, to Instagram, and follow all of the leaders at those companies that are doing the awesome work. They're sharing content on how they think, how they feel on all of those channels. And so you can learn so much more about them that way. And who knows, maybe you can reach out to them because you study them so well and you have a really poignant question to ask them that they think was an impressive question. And then I'll take time to have coffee with you. And then you get a job offer. And I think I'm kind of just really big on, I don't think you need to I hate the concept of best practices or benchmarks, or I really think that the best way we learn and can grow in our careers is by looking out there and finding who are the best people doing the best work. Let's learn from them, let's copy them, and let's kind of recreate what they're doing in a better way. And so that's probably my best kind of career advice. And I think next to that is just don't forget about the relationships in career. And I think I would say that that was something that I needed to realize a few years back. I think most people though over-index on relationships and don't over-index on results. I was the other way around, which wasn't great either. But I think, you need to crush your results, right? If your boss tells you to jump here, you jump double there. Or you jump to where they asked and show them something else that you jumped where they didn't know they needed to jump. But you also need to do relationships, I think, at the same time. I think you can burn bridges if you don't do that. And yeah.
Awesome. Ryan, you're the man. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time, brother.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. It was nice to chat.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you appreciated and enjoyed the episode, go ahead and make a comment on the post for the episode on LinkedIn. If you love the Naberhood podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Until next time, go get it.